This says we're already live on YouTube, Beth.
Yes.
Per our conversation before.
Yeah, I spoke with her right as soon as we hung up our last call.
So it looks like we're on already, even though we're not in session.
Let me ask her.
Yeah, it does say that.
Does that? Who
So I'll
controls?
see.
Oh.
You're also live on the Zoom call.
Oh,
Thank you, Marianne.
thanks, Marianne. I was just about to talk about you too.
Well, I can mute. That's okay.
Yeah, we should check on that.
Yeah, I just spoke with Jim, mentioned that. Oh, no, she said she's not.
Oh, it's gone away. Oh, no, it's still there.
Still there.
It's still there.
You can still hear us, Marianne?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
I thought I was on mute, but I will go on mute right now.
There you go.
We're waiting for mayor. The mayor.
Yeah, I don't see her.
Hi, guys, this is Tracy. I've just gotten a couple of texts saying people are having trouble logging on.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Sure.
There's a lot of people. It might be that they're all coming on at once here.
Chelsea has to let them in one at a time, right?
Oh, yeah. It looks like Kathleen's having trouble too. I did as well. Do you register when you get?
Yeah, I had to register again.
So did I.
Sometimes it asks and sometimes it doesn't.
I know. Okay.
I had no trouble,
Okay.
just FYI.
Okay, thank you.
I came in pretty easily, but it took a while before I got admitted.
All right, can we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance
To the
To the
flag
flag of the United States of America,
And to the republic
Republic,
which is
for which it stands,
One nation.
one
one
nation,
nation, under
God,
God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
justice for all.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for joining. A couple of things. It has been a long 2 weeks since we all last saw each other, with a lot of feedback on a lot of subjects during those 2 weeks. So we have a large agenda tonight, and for those of you who have looked at the agenda on paper, one of the things that is happening is that the feedback is still coming fast and furiously, and we have decided that we will probably have to extend the moratorium for the waterfront planning for at least a month, given the amount of feedback. And that has been one of the requests of the feedback as well. So because of public input, and we know how well it works, we have got to put together a resolution for that. So we are going to switch the meeting agenda around a little bit and have our discussion first and move our introduction to later so that we can get that resolution and be able to present it tonight and pass it, because it also needs public input. Does that make sense to everyone? I hope it does.
Yeah.
So if everyone will bear with me, I apologize for doing that, but so we are going to bring the discussion items up to up front and the introduction of laws beyond that. So let's start though by beginning with the approval of the minutes from our past meetings that we've had since we last met. And that would be a regular meeting held via teleconference on January 12th. The minutes from the executive session held on January 27th. The minutes from the work session also held on January 27th. And the minutes from a special meeting held by teleconference on February 1st. Can I get a motion, please?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Tim, do we have you on for the treasurer's report?
Yes, I'm here.
Great.
It's a quick treasurer's report as of December 31st, 2020. For the revenues, we're still behind in Justice Court, as well as sewers, still lacking based on previous year. And, you know, what's been happening with COVID, they see, you know, lower numbers for those two departments. Otherwise, everyone else is tracking on point. And then as for expenditures, we're still behind a little bit, spending probably about half our budget as of December. But again, I feel like that's going to pick up as the months come on, and we'll see a more uptick in our spending of any kind of contracts or anything like that we have to get done. But for the year, I think we're looking pretty good.
Okay. Is there anything, obviously, yes, the missing the revenue on both the court and the sewer, but is there anything of major danger that we are going to be in trouble with on the budget that you see?
Nothing that I see that comes of note. The revenues, I mean, obviously most of the revenues are the property taxes, which obviously will come in. And we do have, you know, more actually coming in for penalties. So we do see some upticks in other things, but I don't see any major dangers coming in for year end. That's going to be a major loss to us for revenues.
Great. And just so everyone knows, the original cut of the budget has gone to department heads. Department heads will discuss it with their trustee liaisons, and then I'll be discussing it with Tim, and we are moving forward with the rest of the budget. In addition to everything else, we'll have that to look forward to. Is there anything else?
Nope, nothing for me, nothing of note.
A quick question for Tim. Tim, thank you for the new format. It's I can actually understand it a little bit better than the old stuff. What do we have bundled in the non-property taxes?
Non-property taxes are going to be, switch here. That's going to be the utilities, gross receipt taxes, and then really the property tax penalties are the other piece that has it kind of upticked this year.
So the uptick is substantial, it looks like. We budgeted 52.5 as the expected revenue.
Hold on 1 second, I'm having a little hard time hearing. All right, what was that?
The under revenues, local sources, second down, non-property taxes was budgeted at 52,500. And from June to November, it comes in at 97.9, 187% above the projection. I'm just wondering what's going on in that line.
Yeah, that's just the penalties are up. I mean, we only we only budget, expected of 50,000, so that's up to 54 already. And then the gross utilities is about half at 43. So, but
Okay.
yeah, those are
And
the two majors.
And my other question, on the summary page, where does debt service land?
Summary page. Debt service, I mean, it's pretty much paid in full for the year. It's just like interest payments that we have to pay still. So we're only, 8% left, and that's just, I think, 2 more interest payments we have to pay for the year.
Okay. The larger question I'll have about that is what we expect to drive it up in the next fiscal year, but we'll save that discussion for the budget making. So thank you. Thank you.
Beth and I are working on the budget, and yeah, that's a big part of it, and I will discuss that when it comes up.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
No problem.
Does anyone else on the board have a question for Tim?
No, just looking at the sewer budget, we knew that inflows are going to be down because of the reduced use of restaurants. And we can see that, we spoke about that a number of meetings ago, just looking at the monthly reports of inflow. So we can see that now being reflected in the use charges. So that's something that I will be paying special attention to with D. It looks like we're about $60,000 behind. And it's hard to see, maybe restaurants are going to open up a little bit. The governor's allowed 25%, but I don't see us getting back to pre-COVID use. So that will need to be addressed, and I'll be, as I say, paying attention to that.
All right.
I'll
Can I
move
get it?
approval of the report.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we will go into discussion items, starting with the Sag Harbor Waterfront Overlay. And as I said, it's been a busy week of feedback, both on paid parking and on the Waterfront Overlay. And I want to thank all of the people who have sent feedback in, questions, suggestions, etc. It's that's what local government is all about, is you being able to have your opinions, and we appreciate the obvious thought and caring that went into all the comments. Some of the comments have been very technical, and thank goodness we have a great team who knows how to deal with that. Some have been very passionate, and again, I appreciate that everybody cares so much about our village. And some pointed out to us that maybe we weren't as perhaps clear in some of the things as we went forward. So that's one of the things we're going to do tonight, is go through some of the frequently asked questions and make sure that there's clarity out there about what we're talking about. So we'll also go through what the schedule will be for the next few weeks and months to get through this. And part of that is probably going to be an extension on the moratorium. This is something that honestly I would have liked not to have happen, but I do think we heard loud and clear that what we have to do is, this doesn't have to be perfect, but it does have to be right. And we have to get this right. So we want to take the time and be able to listen, be able to talk through things with people and get this right. And then we'll get it to perfect as well. So we appreciate everything, and I'm going to turn it over to Kay Lawson, who is our chair of our planning committee. Kay is who actually, Kay and I spoke about this about a week after I got elected, before I was even in office, when I was meeting with some of our board chairs, and we talked about the need for protecting our waterfront from commercial overdevelopment. So this has been a long time, and Kay has been the driving force behind it, and really wonderful to work with, along with everybody else. But this will be all her baby and Tim McGuire's baby fairly soon. Kay Lawson. Oh, you need to unmute.
Okay, unmuted. Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Board of Trustees. You've heard from me on this now a few times, but just to recap and provide some context for other people at the meeting from the public and the village. This whole idea arose in part in reaction to some development that occurred in the village in recent times, and in part to the realization that there are other buildings on the waterfront that are ripe for redevelopment, including some that have recently changed hands. So with that in mind, the vision was to outline a way to plan for redevelopment in the village for the coming years in a way that's thoughtful and addresses some of the comments and questions and issues that have been raised by recent development that occurred. That being said, Kathy Eisman, Denise, and I started to talk about ways to address this, and then a larger group formed, including other voices from the village. And it was determined because of, budget constraints and other issues that the best way was to hire, these consultants to help us achieve a better vision for redevelopment in the village. Another piece of this was, how do we emphasize the waterfront and our experience with it in the village? How do we make it the best possible experience we could have? How do we, help our village become the best possible village it can be? And what we heard was, view sheds of the water, access to the water, walkways, connecting parts of the village to other parts. And as part of that is hopefully providing alternative metrics for parking, which is obviously a real issue in the village. But I think we've identified ways to give developers other options other than just providing on-site parking. There is an immense and immediate pressure for redevelopment on the waterfront. I think we all are really aware of that, keenly aware of it. How we address that in the next year or two is really going to be key in how the village becomes, reshapes as it goes through this next, influx of money and development. So it became urgent, the need to figure out a solution for this. And thankfully you all heard that and passed the moratorium to help us pause and reflect and think about this all during a pandemic. But another comment, and then I pretty much I'm finished speaking, but when I went to Suffolk County Planning Board, which is a much more sophisticated planning board than the one that I currently have the fortune of chairing in Sag Harbor, is they applauded the idea of Sag Harbor embracing a form-based code and moving that direction. And they encouraged us to do it. And really, it was really positive feedback to hear. So with that being said, a lot of work has been put in, and you'll hear more about the details of the code, but that's sort of the context under which we've come to this point in time. So thank you very much.
Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to Kathy Eisman and the team from the Waterfront Committee to take us through both the transportation demand management portion of the code as well as the FAQs and the timing.
Okay. Beth, are you able to let me share my screen?
Chelsea should be able to allow you to do that. Chelsea?
Looks like she's done that.
Chelsea?
Just got it.
There you
No, we
go.
got it.
Thank you.
Okay, so tonight Valerie is going to go through the schedule with us. Valerie Monastra from NPNV. Then we're going to turn it over to Chris Hawley, who's going to present the transportation demand management procedure that we are recommending. And then I'm going to talk about some of the frequently asked questions that we've heard over and over. I mean, there are a few that keep coming back, and so we want to just at least clarify those tonight. But first, we'll turn it over to Valerie and let her go through the schedule, because that will enlighten everyone where and when they can actually provide comments and how this is all going to unfold. So, Valerie, take it away.
Okay, great. So just to remind everyone, we provided a draft of the overlay, and that's available on the Sag Harbor Village website. One of the things that we wanted to talk a little bit about tonight was, as you know, we presented the draft, we presented a number of presentations on the overlay, and we really wanted everyone to understand the process now moving forward. First and foremost, just like the mayor mentioned, we thank everybody for providing us their comments and their feedback, because it's extremely important during this type of public process to get that kind of feedback, especially from the community. So one of the things that we wanted to really emphasize tonight is that we are continuing to take public comment. We are planning to have the public comment process open until February 16th. Now, this will not be the only time public comment is received. What we're planning to do at this point in time is take public comment on the initial draft. Once we compile all the comments received, we're going to send them both to the Waterfront Planning Committee as well as the Village Board. And I want to emphasize again, anybody that has submitted public comments up to this point in time, anybody that has verbally spoken to the committee, any emails, all of that's being compiled as we speak. So all of that is still a part of the normal public process. And then again, we are keeping it open till February 16th. We are taking all public comment. The best way to submit it is on the email there, which is info@sagharbor.newyork.gov. Once we receive all the public comment, we'll be appearing before the Waterfront Planning Committee. They'll be reviewing and providing recommendations on the comments that receive. These recommendations are going to be forwarded to the Village Board. At the February 24th Village Board work session, we're going to present the public comments that we received, as well as recommendations from the Waterfront Planning Committee. The Village Board will then, as we walk them through, they'll determine if they want to include any of the recommended changes or public comments received into the overlay text. Then we will, if there are potential changes that the Village Board would like to see as part of that overlay text, we will work and provide another version of that waterfront, of the waterfront overlay. Once we actually have a version of the overlay that includes all the initial revisions from the Village Board, as well as anything else that's remaining from the public, the Village Board will be able to call for a public hearing on the overlay. So the public hearing itself will be another process in which the public can provide additional comment. And the Village Board will also have another opportunity to make any revisions it deems necessary based on the public comment of the public hearing. So we want to emphasize to you that we're actually going to have 2 rounds of public comment period. This first round is going to end on the 16th on the initial document. And then once we incorporated any revisions to that and the Village Board feels comfortable to send it out for a public hearing on the actual waterfront overlay itself, then we will have another public comment process. And it will be similar to this one, where there'll be a public comment period. We'll receive all the comments, and then we'll also work with the Village Board to identify specific public comments that they might want to include into the final draft of the overlay. So are there any questions from the Village Board as to the process that we're anticipating unfolding over the next few weeks? Okay. Well, then with that, oh, yes.
Question on the schedule.
Sure.
Thank you, Valerie, for that good report. The transportation management plan we're about to hear about
Yes.
only came into the public eye a couple of days ago. Is it also subject to that February 16th deadline?
No, and at this point, they are actually going to be ultimately 2 separate local laws. And I know Denise is on the call, so she can also weigh in on this. So there'll be 2 separate local laws. We understand that there are 2 slightly different tracks. I think for the schedule that we laid out is specifically for the Waterfront Overlay District. although the traffic demand management piece will be following slightly behind that. And again, we can develop a similar public process with the village board if you would like to do that as well.
The TDM
And we can
is
also
not
provide
just-
similar timeframes.
I'm sorry, the TDM is not just for the overlay district? It's for the village?
I think we're going to actually talk about that this evening. And so, yes.
Okay, we can
The
defer
short
that
answer
to
is
that.
yes, but I'm gonna leave all the details. That's the very next piece of the presentation that you'll be hearing tonight.
Okay, just going in, and I just want to raise the concern that I'm not sure the 16th is providing enough time, considering the plan itself has only been out there since the 22nd of January. We wouldn't even be giving folks, it's better a couple of days more than 3 weeks to this very complicated code revision. I don't think it's enough time, but that's not on you. I'm just taking this minute to point that out. And then from that, the rest of the schedule, I think, is should be enriched for more opportunity for people, particularly now that the TDM is out, which is only a couple of days ago. And thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
other comments from the trustees?
No, I would agree with Jim that a little more time would be good. There's a lot to take in here. There's a lot to unpack for everybody. And we're talking about extending the moratorium. So maybe in the light of that, we could look at some of these dates and see if we can allow a little more room.
And again, though, keep in mind that this is still public comment. This is not public input. So we have, so we do have, our work session at the end of the month that will really be a full discussion of how the both codes fit together and work. And then we will start the public input sessions. So we are still, we still do have quite a bit to go of discussion, as well as potentially other.
Yes, and that is correct. There will be, which is why we have these 2 rounds of public comment periods really built into the process. Because once you go to the public hearing for the local law, the board can actually keep the public hearing open for as long as you see fit. This is just really, there's a lot of comments that are coming in from the public. And what we really wanted to do is create a framework in which we are letting the public know we hear you, we're reviewing it, and we are making potential amendments to the code specifically based upon the public comment. And then that version will go out for public hearing. And then there'll be another public process again, but it'll be on a potentially slightly different version than what is being presented now.
Thank you.
Right. Valerie, do you want to take questions from the audience as well at this point, or do we want to save all questions from the public to further near the end?
Well, I was just, that's really up to you. I was just really asking if there's any questions on the actual schedule and next steps and the public comments period.
Dennis,
after that, I would like to turn it over to Chris.
Right. Dennis, I saw your hands up. Is it on the schedule or is it on the entire?
It's on the entire concept of what you're doing. I think we've got a mistake being made here. If you can just hear me out for a couple of seconds.
Sure.
A rudimentary principle of zoning is that all zoning has to be done pursuant to a comprehensive plan. Now, this may be comprehensive for the waterfront, but it's not comprehensive for the entire village. And we made the same mistake in 2009. And I voiced my objection then, and I voice it again now. In 2009, you attacked all the uses that were in the village business district, and you came up with a VB district and an OD district. But that's it. You didn't go anywhere else. We left the waterfront alone. We left the residential section for most part alone. You need to have a comprehensive plan that covers the entire village, every district that you have, every use that you possibly could have, and not just keep doing these things piecemeal. Because right now you're concerned about overdevelopment in the waterfront area, and I'm concerned about it myself. I represent the Sag Harbor Yacht Club, and we're very concerned about what happens around us. But the problem I see in the village is we always putting our finger in the dike to solve a problem, and then we walk away from it, and then years go by, and then we come up with another problem, and all of a sudden it's another moratorium and another set of rules. Why can't we just do one comprehensive plan for the entire village, and hopefully it will be valid for several years until it has to be updated, as opposed to constantly piecemealing these various districts? I just think it's a mistake on where you're doing it. And I think it leaves the village open to a lawsuit that zoning wasn't adopted pursuant to a comprehensive plan. I'll defer to your attorney. Denise is very knowledgeable on this stuff. And I think she can send you some articles on it where courts have overturned various zoning codes because it wasn't done pursuant to a comprehensive plan. That's all I want to say. I fell on deaf ears in 2009, and I don't know if this board is going to wind up saying, let's bite the bullet and go after the whole zoning code and see what we need to change throughout the entire village, whether it be residential or commercial areas, the OD district, the waterfront, whatever district it may be. But it needs to be comprehensive so that the entire village knows what's going on for the next several years.
Dennis, could I just ask you, I mean, I understand where you're coming from and I don't disagree, but we have immediate issues to deal with. Would you suggest that to take on a comprehensive plan that we would have to have a moratorium in place for how long? How much that would upset everything else going on in the village?
No, we're very happy to answer that. I can assure you that no moratorium that I've ever seen in the 48 years I've been practicing here in Sag Harbor has ever been for 6 months. They always get extended. And usually they get extended at 30-day clips, which is a joke. You should extend it for 6 months at a time. If you need to extend it to do the right job, extend it, do it. The property owners are going to be more concerned about having something done right than to push something through and then we find out later on it's not the right thing to do because it conflicts with something else that we've got going on in the village. There's always going to be putting your finger in the dike, no question about it. But I think you can bring planners in here. You've got a group of planners from upstate that are probably one of the best in the world. Let them look at the whole village code, not just the waterfront. And no offense to Kathy and her crew at NPV, they're doing a good job, but they're doing what you're telling them to do. You're saying, look at the waterfront. Okay, fine. Or maybe next month and next year, we'll look at some other district in the village. I think we should look at every district in the village and do it. And I don't have a fight in this battle or anything like that. I'm just concerned about doing it right. I mean, it's so difficult practicing law in these municipalities where they constantly just change the law just because they're trying to fix a problem. It always creates another problem. We did the same thing in 1985, and I was part of that. We rewrote the code in 1985. Theoretically, it was a comprehensive plan because we hired a planner, and basically he copied Southampton Town zoning code. But we called it a comprehensive plan. I don't think it was that very comprehensive. But that's my own personal opinion, and I was part of the writing of that code. But again, it's up. You're the board. You have to make a decision. You got a budget. You got to work with, and I understand why you have to do these things. But it seems to me we should broaden the scope of this plan and not just cover the waterfront.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone else?
So I would just, I would suggest that we hold off on the public comment. I mean, we are accepting the public comment on the draft overlay until the 16th. And if you want to extend it, that's great. That's fine. You know, we have a lot to cover. So I don't know how much we want to get into it tonight. It's up to you, Mayor and Board of Trustees. So, but if you have any questions on the schedule for Valerie, because she's our schedule expert, she volunteered to come tonight, even though she's got another public hearing at 7 o'clock in another municipality. So if there are any other questions for Valerie, if we could get those to her now.
Okay.
Oh, okay. All right. So Valerie, at 7 o'clock, we will say goodbye to you.
Yes, and with that, I'll turn it over to Chris, and he's going to talk a little bit about the traffic demand management strategies.
Great. I thought I'd just bring the, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'll have to share a screen. I thought it'd be useful to bring up the draft text of the ordinance itself. I don't know who's in charge of that. There we go. So a very important reform that we heard about from the stakeholders involved in this process regarded parking. And I think there's a rule in architecture and urbanism that form follows parking. And no matter what rules you establish in terms of the dimensions and height and placement of buildings, parking plays a really critical role in the form and shape of development in any town, village, or city. And so parking is one of those the hidden sets of rules that has a profound effect on the form and character of new construction when it takes place. And so a very critical part in making any overlay successful is figuring out how to grapple with the travel demand that's created by new businesses or development projects. And we went back and forth quite a bit with citizens and stakeholders and village officials about how best to approach this issue in a way that is tailored to Sag Harbor's unique and distinctive conditions and challenges, and come up with a solution that moves the discussion further down the pike. Not providing a solution for the parking problem overall, but at least providing a new set of tools that the village doesn't have currently to address the travel demand challenges that are created when new development takes place. So as a secondary part of that feedback from officials, we determined that it was necessary to approach this problem a little bit more systematically by proposing a transportation demand management provision that would apply to the village business, waterfront, and office districts, which are mostly in the village core, but with some parcels elsewhere. And that was in order to allow all property owners, business owners, and property owners the ability to be treated fairly and consistently with a unified village approach to parking and travel demand. And initially, we proposed adopting a transportation demand management provision only for the overlay district. But of course, there are other projects in the immediate vicinity that would be better served for citizens as well as for the project by having some flexibility built in to the code provisions. So this transportation demand management draft provisions have been posted to the village website. And what they are basically is basically a plan B. So we have currently in the Sag Harbor zoning ordinance a fairly one-size-fits-all ironclad approach to travel demand. There are off-street parking requirements which you must meet, and if you don't meet them, then you go to the Zoning Board of Appeals to secure a variance. That's not a whole lot, and it's fairly handcuffed in terms of the types of approaches that might be required or needed on a project-by-project basis. But basically what this does is in those cases where it's either impractical or impossible to provide the number of off-street dedicated parking spaces for each use that is proposed in the village center, to allow for a reduction in the number of off-street parking spaces and truck loading required through the preparation and approval of a transportation demand management plan. And what that will basically allow the village to do is demand more give back from applicants, property owners, business owners, and the like, where X number of required parking spaces can't be provided or are impractical given the scope of the project. And these would be inserted into the overall chapter 300 zoning of the village code, rather than only the overlay, to ensure fairness and consistency. Number one, before we get into the provisions themselves, I just want to reinforce that the off-street parking requirements would not go away with the adoption of this reform. The responsibility for accommodating anticipated travel demand would remain. What this does is provide an alternative form of compliance, rather than only requiring a minimum number of off-street dedicated on-site parking spaces. It would, in those cases where that is not practical, allow for alternatives to be considered by the planning board in a plan prepared by a qualified professional. So currently, Sag Harbor has no plan B if an applicant comes before the Zoning Board of Appeals for a parking variance. This offers the village a way to secure a plan B, in other words, to require the applicant to produce an alternative plan for accommodating anticipated travel demand if it is not through dedicated on-site parking. So this plan, as you described in this kind of roughly 3-page provision, would be assembled by a transportation planner or traffic engineer who will assess, using industry accepted standards for the number of trips and parking demand the project is likely to create, the travel demand that is likely to come out of a project, and then to propose the ways that that will be accommodated. So as a first order priority, and we'll just kind of skim down here to the document, I definitely encourage you all to read it and try to understand it. As a first order priority, a project must consider alternative parking strategies for any travel demand not met on site. So for instance, where alternative parking strategies are, and we'll just kind of zoom down to where that is. So if it can't be accommodated on site, shared parking arrangements by written contract produced to the village in advance within 1/4 mile of the subject site must be considered. And if not that, or perhaps in addition to that strategy, designated remote parking with valet or shuttle services. And where alternative parking strategies are exhausted, a project may consider other transportation demand management strategies that would encourage, and there's a list of them in the document as examples of those TDM strategies, but strategies that are designed to minimize the number of single occupancy vehicle trips. TDM basically is a set of strategies to manage demand through alternative means where it cannot be accommodated through conventional off-street parking solutions. So examples include, in addition to shared parking and ride sharing, facilities and programs to promote pedestrian and bicycle travel, without which the historic walkable character of Sag Harbor simply can't be reflected in new construction. So this third section of this set of provisions goes in great detail about what is required to be submitted in a transportation demand management plan. This is by necessity a very detailed approach to the submittal requirements for a TDM plan. The object, of course, being that the transportation professional assembling them will produce a relatively predictable set of plans as development projects come through. What you'll be receiving as a village will be fairly consistent and predictable. And the standards that the planning board would apply whenever making a decision to approve the conditions or disapprove a project and its TDM plan would focus on a couple principal factors. Number one, it'll determine whether the project includes performance objectives to minimize single occupancy vehicle trips and maximize the utilization of transportation alternatives like walking, biking, and transit where practical, taking into account the unique opportunities and constraints of the site and the nature of the development. And B, perhaps most importantly, is to demonstrate through the quality and thoroughness of the plan that is submitted by a professional to meet the anticipated travel demand of a project without placing an unreasonable burden on public infrastructure or unreasonably interfering with the use, enjoyment, and convenience of the surrounding neighborhood. Those are the basic provisions. I simply wanted to give a very basic outline of what the TDM plan does in this roughly 3 or 4 pages. And but this basically gives the village a set of tools to require some concession and an analysis from applicants where the parking requirements can't be met, while reinforcing the walkable historic character of the village center. Thank you, and I'd look forward to any comments or questions.
Trustee LaRocca?
Thank you, Chris. It wasn't clear to me, is the TDM burden or responsibility that's created and addressed in the application of a new or the redevelopment, does that apply to existing buildings and activities in the village?
It would only in certain cases, like a change of use or an expansion of the existing building. So if, say, for instance, an office building were converted to a restaurant and apartments, and a 1,000 square foot addition were made to the rear, that would trigger parking requirements in the zoning ordinance. Maybe, or maybe they can't be met through off-street parking dedicated on site. And in that case, under the current zoning ordinance, typically an applicant would simply seek an area variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals. What this would do would be to allow the applicant to promote creative alternatives to meeting the parking requirements where that is an impractical or difficult set of standards to meet.
So let me give you one hypothetical then. So an existing bank on the west side of Main Street, there for many years, under whatever permits and history it has, directly across the street, an existing use is changing to, I don't know, a competing bank. will the new bank have the burdens of a TDM while the old bank does not?
If the new bank were to be a change of use, that would trigger the parking requirements in your current zoning ordinance. And what this reform would do, if those parking requirements could not be met, is provide an alternative form of compliance for the new bank to meet.
Okay. Second question, our biggest business in the village, if you will, is the school district in terms of activity and people and transportation. What effect would this have on our school district and their bundle of transportation issues that they struggle with?
It all depends on whether that school is located in either the VB, WF, or OD districts, which is the only place where this set of provisions would apply. So if it was in the R20 single family district or the RM resort motel district, these standards, at least as we propose them, would not apply. They would simply have to meet the parking requirements or seek a variance if needed.
Okay. If I could ask you to go back to the shared screen for a minute, to the list. I think it was on the first page.
Okay.
I'm sorry, second page. Here we go. Where the B on page 2, list there 9 strategies to be incorporated in a TDM. Am I in the right place?
Yep.
Okay. Take out the unbundled parking for the moment. Almost everything else on that list has been part of the state energy master plan going back to 1978, the various transportation control plans enacted in every DOT region, which I think, if my memory serves, as 11 regions. And the experience, the practical experience is that, and by comparison to places that are entirely new developments, planned developments, in applying these kind of measures onto an existing community, as opposed to building them into a planned or a new community, is no matter how well they land in fairly short order, because so much of this is regulating personal behavior and things that people are used to, most of these strategies fail. Experience, I think, will tell us. The risk it poses is that we accept the TDM, professional and all the rest, as an alternative to using the tools we have now, only to find that the process of gaining public acceptance, enforcement, and actual utilization of the plan is such that they tend to drift out to sea. So that's not a question, it's a comment based on my own experience, but I think it's something that in the time we're allotting ourselves for this, I would like to hear about communities, existing communities that have in common with us. We're aged and a little bit disorganized, but we've been around. Where you might point to as places where this has worked with some success that we could examine.
Well, I would say that this, thank you, Trustee LaRocca. This set of provisions is very similar to a model parking reduction ordinance that the Suffolk County Planning Commission has issued. I would say that level of expertise at the Suffolk County Planning Commission, I think at least shows that there's already a level of thinking about how these strategies might work in Eastern Long Island. But this is a set of strategies that a lot of municipalities all over the country, Buffalo included, obviously a very different place, has adopted with some great success. I would say that with regard to the success or non-success of any particular strategy, it's the job of the transportation professional assembling the plan to demonstrate through evidence and if possible through local example, where these standards or these strategies have worked, and if so, how much has it worked? So for instance, if additional bicycle parking is inserted or if shared parking arrangements are arranged, to what extent has that reduced the amount of single occupancy vehicle trips that are utilized by a site? Has it actually reduced the parking demand so that parking isn't needed? So it's very much an evidence-based approach. It leaves open, I think, to planning board discretion, the analysis of the effectiveness of each strategy, but it's the burden of the applicant and the professional preparing the plan to show that this will work and to the best extent possible.
And the enforcement falls to the municipality.
As always, yep, with any zoning provision, certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else who would like to comment on this? I do not see anyone, but Adam Potter.
Yeah, you know, I thank you for putting this document together. I don't think it's on the website yet, and we'd love to take a look at that. Our impression is at the end of the day, transportation is really an infrastructure.
Adam, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but would you introduce yourself? Because not everyone knows who you are, please.
Sure. Adam Potter. I am the chairman of Friends of Bay Street, but I'm not talking specifically from Friends of Bay Street at this point, because we'll talk a little bit later about that. So I guess how I view it is, at the end of the day, parking and transportation is an infrastructure issue. And my concern is you'll have many people submitting their individual plans, similar to many people how they've submitted their individual septic systems. And we've seen many septic systems cause a big environmental mess until the sewer system came into place. Recognizing that the village doesn't have the money to do an extensive transportation management plan, to me, it seems more prudent while we recognize the codes are there, and while we recognize, yes, there is a petition out there that's been signed by about 10% of the village residents to do away completely with parking, and recognizing that's not going to happen. What about bringing back the purchasing of phantom spaces and have that money go into a fund that would fund a transportation management plan for the village? So if we need 50 spots because we don't have them, charge us $1,000 a spot. That would raise the money to put a comprehensive plan in for the village, similar to putting in a sewer treatment plant for the village. My concern is you're going to have everybody that's going to submit a new transportation management plan is going to get their own experts, their own opinions. And while they're going to look really nice, somewhat to Jim's point, they're not individually going to work, and we need more of a comprehensive plan by the village. So by bringing back the kind of pay for places you don't have, will then increase the money for the village to put this plan in place.
Thank you. Are there any other comments that want to be made at this point? All right, and Kathy, I'm sending it back to you.
Okay, I need to share my screen, Chelsea.
Can I just comment on that point quickly? Everybody hear me? No.
Yep.
Oh, that's in theory a good idea, but actually it's not, because as the scale and scope of these projects go up cost-wise, those parking paid to pay for variances becomes essentially a trivial line item for a big construction project, and it doesn't solve any problems. And I would strongly recommend that we do not have that option, because no one, for instance, you could even skip the whole traffic demand part of it and just go right to here's the check. We're doing what we want to do. And that would be, I think that would be a great detriment. Thank you.
Before I go on, anybody else? I just want to just go. No? Okay. So we've been working on a frequently asked questions document that's been updated twice, and we are in the process of updating it again. That is on the village project website for this project, the Waterfront initiative has its own webpage. But I did want to highlight a few of these that keep coming up. And one of them is very specific, asking, will the maximum height be increased by the creation of this overlay district? And the answer is no. Under the existing code, the maximum height is 35 feet in the underlying districts. That's VB, OD, and WF districts. That is also 2 stories maximum in OD and WF, but you can still have 35 feet maximum height, or 3 stories in the VB district. And I'll show you a map here. This pink, maybe salmon-ish pink color is the VB district. Maximum height right now, you can have 35 feet or 3 stories. The OD district is in the orange. Maximum height, again, 35 feet, 2 stories. We've been asked questions, what would that look like, a 2-story building that's 35 feet? In my mind, the ARB would require it to look like 3 stories because they wouldn't want to have a 2-story building that's 35 feet tall, but that is permitted by the code. And then again, in the waterfront district, which is this lilac color, maximum height 35 feet, also 2 stories. So as is proposed in the overlay district, as it's written now in the draft, the maximum height would be 35 feet. Anywhere you could have a 35-foot building, you would be required to step it back 10 feet for the 3rd story. So when you're on the sidewalk, it would appear as if it's a 2-story building. And then to achieve the full 3 stories on the waterfront or on a waterfront park, you would need to provide public access and other community benefits that would be reviewed by the planning board. And that is by this establishment of height subzones. Height subzone B is along the waterfront. That's the lighter purple. And that's where the maximum of 2 stories or 25 feet without providing public access or community benefits, that would be the maximum. But there is the potential to go up to 35 feet and 3 stories. But again, you need the waterfront access. And that's something that the village has been trying to get, the public access to the waterfront on private property. That's part of the LWRP policies. Only it's not, you can't just require it outright. You can strong arm people and eventually get it, but you can't require public access on private property. And so there needs to be, and we had talked about having this as a benefit to allow an additional story without creating the creating an impact. Oh, okay, Chelsea admitted those folks that were waiting. And then the other area is the height subzone A, which is on the south side of Bay Street and on Long Island Avenue in the darker purple. The maximum height would not increase over 35 feet, but again, we would have the requirement to have a 10-foot step back for the upper story. Another question is, why are there changes to the use table? As you've talked about, there was a split between the overall commercial district in, I guess it was 2009, where the office district was created and certain uses were taken out of weren't allowed anymore in the office district. The thought in this area, and again, this is, it's a smaller area of the village, it's not the entire office district. The idea is to open up some additional uses within the overlay district and let the market drive what the uses, go in. And this is the idea is that this is more about the form of development and open it up and let the market decide. So that's what's proposed at this point. And we've gotten several comments about use. The other big concern is that this is going to change the way applications are reviewed. The authorities will not change. The HPARB, the Planning Board, the Harbor Committee, and Zoning Board, when there is relief, will continue to have the same authority over review of applications if and when this overlay district is adopted, and I hope it is. As we are proposing it, the Planning Board will have an expanded role in 2 areas. One is that to achieve the height bonus on the waterfront, to get the 35 feet, they would need to review for the criteria to make sure that they provide the public access, and provide three public benefits, which are identified in the code, different items that we are looking at strengthening that language. That is one thing we are definitely looking at. And then the other is that where a TDM is provided by an applicant for off-street parking relief, the planning board will provide a recommendation to the zoning board. We're identifying the location in the code where this would go, but if a TDM is provided, the applicant would still need to identify the number of parking spaces that are required by code. And in the end, it would be the zoning board that would provide the relief, only they will have something to base it on. They will have a parking management strategy and show that they can accommodate the demand for parking for the use. And actually there is, this is what Chris had talked about. Right now, the off-street parking and loading requirements are going to continue to apply. And this is a procedure that we're recommending occur for all within the VB district, the OD, and the WF district throughout the village. All right, so I originally had, please submit written comments by February 16th, but that's going to be up to you guys to tell me what to put in there. We will update the schedule on the webpage tomorrow once we have that feedback. And I guess stay tuned is what I should say at this point.
Great, thank you, Kathy. In regards to the February 16th, I mean, you can submit comments on this plan anytime you want. We will try to get any comments submitted by the 16th, give or take, into our discussion that will happen on the 24th. And that work session will be focusing on pretty much a line by line, section by section review of this law. So any comments that we want to discuss, it's good to have it in. And, you know, the 16th would be lovely. The 24th will be our next work session with open comments and board comments on the code. So with that, we are done on this part, correct? Do we have any other comments from the board or from anybody else before we move forward? Deputy Mayor Gardella?
I'm sure you've had this feedback. I'm a little concerned about opening up the district to other uses or to other, you said something about we'll let the market drive it. I mean, what about the character of the village and that changing the character of the village as it stands right now? And I was wondering if you had any other comments about that or input from the public.
I think, Tom, we're going to go really deep on the 24th about the uses. That's been a big thing. And we've actually been asked to look at bringing in an outside consultant to review the uses. So we will go further. But Marta, do you have something you want to add to that?
I was just going to comment that what we heard when we did our phase 1 report having to do with the vision and the goals for this project, the conversation about the character of the village really focused on form, the ability to have public access, both visually and pedestrian wise, to the water, height, scale, placement. We heard, and we also heard a desire to have a mix of uses, to have more residential, and to have a more active street life. And so when we talk about letting the market decide, we've opened it up to a few additional uses to try and meet those goals. Because the form goals, we think we've covered pretty well by the other provisions, but the active street life and the pedestrian activity and the eclectic nature are things that we were aiming for or responding to, I guess we should say, when we suggested having a little bit more flexibility in the uses. So that was where that came from.
Thanks. All right, Moving on, our next subject is the Sag Harbor Cinema Summer Screenings at Havens Beach. And I believe Jamie Hook, Executive Director of the cinema, is on the phone with us. I don't know if
I
Susan
am here.
on.
You
Hi.
can see my smiling, beautiful face if you allow it, but it says that you have relegated me to the netherworld of Zoom. But hello, trustees. Good evening. I've met many of you. This is my first trial by fire at a Village of Sag Harbor trustees meeting. I'm very pleased to be here. Very briefly, we have submitted for a permit to use Havens Beach roughly from Memorial Day through the summer. We've submitted a permit to even go as far as Columbus Day in October. But I want to stress that we have been expansive in this request because we do not yet understand whether our cinema will be able to open this summer or not. And this request should be viewed in the context of, if the cinema is constrained from opening, it's very important to us to be able to provide a regular, affordable, local, fun character screening facility for the people of Sag Harbor. As you know, we did this last year. Two significant changes from what we had put together from last year. One is that we discovered that the burden of building and then taking down a screen every week for the drive-ins at Havens Beach last summer pushed the project into a sort of unsustainable financial position. It just wound up being extremely expensive and cumbersome to actually get out there every single week, build an enormous screen, remove it, and do again the same week. So one of the differences in the application that we've submitted this time around is for the screen to be fixed through the summer. Obviously, that would be subject to certain weather patterns. If there's news that wind is going to be extreme, we would come in and remove the screen. But I believe we had been working with a company so a screen could be fixed up to about 40-mile-per-hour winds. Anything over than that, we'd have to take it down. And then the second thing that is a major change from last summer is that we have sort of come to the conclusion that it's a much more sort of amenable and fun way to see a movie, to not privilege so much the drive-in scenario as much as a walk-in or a blanket-in, if you will, scenario, where folks would be driving to Havens Beach. They might also be walking or biking to Havens Beach, but the actual place where people would absorb and watch the movie would be very much more spaced, a grid that was perhaps created by traffic cones allowing people to be socially distant, but people would walk in there with their blankets and they would picnic in front of a movie screen and do it that way. The cars would simply be parked on site as a way of parking, but the actual people watching the movie would not be in their cars. Because of that second change, we much prefer a situation where the screen and the actual viewers are inside the circle in the middle of Havens Beach, as opposed to the lawn that's over to the north side of the east side of the Havens Beach. You should have two pieces of paper that were circulated earlier today. This is option 2 that I'm referring to now, if you happen to have those pieces of paper. Option 1 is the lesser of the two from our standpoint, but still absolutely workable. And in option 1, again, we still do have automobiles using Havens Beach as a space to park, but they would be kept away from the screen, and people would be encouraged to use the lawn and use blankets as a picnicking venue. Now, I just want to conclude by saying that this is all quite speculative, but in order for us to be able to pull this off and not sort of lose a pile of money, we need to know fairly early so that we can get underwriting for this kind of a program if indeed we go forward with it. And again, I want to emphasize that it's a bit of a not a preemptive, but an anticipatory proposal that we've put in, because we do not know if our cinema will be able to open on Memorial Day. Will it be able to open on July 1st? Will it not be able to open into the fall? So if people can pose questions in that context, I'll be happy to do my very best to answer them. And thank you so much for hearing our request. That's all I had to say about it.
And for the trustees, I can put the two options up on the screen if you haven't had a chance to see them.
Tom, I noticed your fingers were up.
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions and a couple of issues. First one is, I'm hoping, it's my wish that the fire department can have their carnival and your cinema will be open. And therefore, there won't be any challenges to doing this at the same time.
Absolutely. Your carnival is scheduled for the 3rd to the 7th of August, if I'm correct. So
Correct.
that's,
Right. My advice to you, my strong advice to you, the cinema, is not to use the center area because of the grass that's there. This is, again, this is if the carnival happens. It's very sandy in there, and you're going to have a situation. Even if you try to drive cars on there, it's going to be almost impossible.
cars would be on that grassy area. If you can see option 2, it would be only people, but I certainly understand that.
I mean, I would be more accepting if both events tend to happen, which is probably not likely, that if you put a fixed screen up on what is considered, I guess, the east side on the right there,
right,
in an area that wouldn't conflict with our parking, I mean, I think that would be acceptable. And as long as it was fenced in, so nobody could drive into that area or walk into where the screen is. But I would not be for using the center.
Okay.
Of
So to clarify, you're more enthusiastic about option 1 than option 2, just to put numbers to it.
Correct. And as I spoke to Susan Mead about this, we would go over with the fire department chiefs where to situate that screen to where it won't affect parking or anything. If this is, of course, is a scenario where we're both doing this event at the same time, which is probably not likely, Jamie.
Okay, exactly. I agree. And I'm pleased to see that it's August, because I have a strong hunch that the theater will be able to be open as a cinema sometime in the summer, probably during the month of July at the latest. So August looks much cleaner and clearer from where I sit now.
Right. So nothing is going to be going over where the medevac landing zone is. Is that correct? Which is
No.
Yeah, that's correct.
I do think if we do this, I do think that you should, assuming you're still going by August, that screen would have to come down for the week of the carnival, regardless of where it is, just to keep it safe and everything else. You don't, it's just the better part of caution to take it down. So either finish the series by early August or plan on taking it down and then putting it back on. However, I think we have bigger issues. I believe Trustee LaRocca had his hand up before you, Aiden, but.
Oh, it's fine. Good.
Yeah, just very quickly. I worked on behalf of the board with the cinema last summer, and every issue that you've raised here is something we addressed and dealt with last summer. So I'd like to volunteer, if you care, Mayor, to do that again on behalf of the board. And you can save some Jamie and the others time right now, and he and I will get together. We'll make our list of issues, and the next time we come back, we'll have a more thought through concept. But these are all the same issues. It's the same beach, so we can come back to that.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Aiden?
Quick question. I think it's a great idea. Thought it was a great success last summer. In addition to the screen, what other infrastructure would you be planning on leaving on site throughout the week or the dead time?
I believe that we can minimize our footprint so that it would be the screen and then perhaps one small case that's left underneath it and bolted to it or chained to it to contain a few pieces of equipment. But I really think if you can imagine a metal structure, sort of a metal gridwork structure that is up there, who knows, it may be 20 feet wide by 10, 12 feet high. And that really, with a screen in it, that really is the only piece that remains through the week. Everything else is set up on the day of, meaning cones. We may need to have grade stakes with ropes on them just to help guide people into various places, but those would go in, those would come out at the end of the day and be reset the next week. And I think that really it's just the screen that would remain.
Okay. Thanks, James. Thank you. Appreciate that.
And to remind us, what's the timing and expected?
The timing of the events was, we were hoping that they would be able to be run on Saturday evenings, Memorial Day, and we've said through Columbus Day, but that's to be taken with a hefty grain of salt. I mean, I think Memorial Day, we're looking through July would be a very strong possibility. August, it lessens down significantly. September, October, we're really just being aspirational there. And I actually would if you asked me to put a bet on one of those scenarios, I wouldn't bet on August, September, October.
And why Saturday night? Last year it was Sunday night.
We discovered that Sunday night was simply not super viable for the most diverse audience that we'd like to get. There are many people who do work in the morning, and there are many people who indeed leave town in the, on a Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening. And we thought it would be more, I think, more robust of a program if we were able to do it Saturday and rely on people's ability to have a Sunday morning. Because, as you know, the sun doesn't go down until 8:30 on June 21st. So you really are hard pressed to start a program much before 8:45, 9 p.m. So you're talking 10:30 before people are getting out of there, 11 o'clock if they're actually the stragglers. And that can be a late night for some people who have to get up early and either work or head back to the city. So that was our preference.
One more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you're proposing that people sit on blankets, which I think is great. Where would people park? Is everybody going to go down to the waterfront where the parking lot is and then park there and walk back up?
If you look at option 2, the X is on the right side of the road, the east side of the road there, that's where parking is. And then the blankets are represented by these little squares. So we still would use that grassy area to the west of the road, of the entry road, as a place to park cars. But, and the difficulty actually in option 2, obviously would, option 1, it would be slightly more work to try and figure out a way to have cars so that people could leave, potentially halfway through a movie and not disturb anybody who wanted to stay. Slightly more difficult than option 2, but ultimately that's where the cars would go.
And my last question, I promise you, do we know of any conflicts aside from the carnival? Any other conflicts with other events that have been booked or are normally scheduled for Saturdays throughout the summer? I know your event is late in the evening, so I just sort of cognizant of everybody who lives down there, and the constant use being made.
Yeah, I think a Saturday night is asking a lot to do this for the neighbors. I think that that's an awful lot on the neighbors to have it on a Saturday night. But at the moment, I don't believe we have anything else. It's but we are also a little early on the timing. I don't think we have too many night things that happen at Havens Beach. There will be, with a little bit of luck in a positive world, the fireman's picnic as well, which would be, and that's usually a Sunday. Tom, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Yep.
There were a couple of other events. There was the paddleboard event. That's an annual charitable. It goes through the day and into the evening.
Yeah.
I didn't want to get into the detail now, but we did talk about Saturday versus Sunday last year, and there's a manpower issue for the village in terms of public safety. We pretty much have to throw everything we have out there in the village on a Saturday night at the height of the summer. Sunday night was a lot easier for AJ to deploy a couple of people, and they became integral to the management of the event and the arrival of cars and so forth. So these are the things I think we have to work together on.
Absolutely. Excellent point.
I said I had no more questions, but I guess I lied. Last time when everybody was on drive-in, I believe the sound was transmitted on an FM band into the automobile radios.
Yep.
How do you propose to provide sound for everybody sitting on blankets?
Our proposal would be to use 4 pole-mounted powered speakers. So it would be an ambient public sound as opposed to something inside people's cars. That said, with 4 of them, you're really able to surround people and aim it inside, and the sound dissipates pretty quickly off of the main footprint. But there is there is a sound presence that probably 40 yards away, you'd still be able to hear it. 100 yards away, I think it would be pretty minimal. But that's something we'd have to get out there and make sure we tested so that expectations could be set.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Jane.
The one other comment I have just on option 2 is that that screen being up all the time really does, as you come into Havens Beach as a visitor to Havens Beach, that sort of ruins your view and is in smack dab in the middle of your view. So it's not something I would like to see there for the entire summer. That's
a good
so
point.
we will leave it to you and Trustee LaRocca and your committee to come back to us. And we realize that you want to be able to start getting sponsorship and everything else. Our next meeting is February 24th. We can talk about it at the work session. But I think there's some things to be taken care of.
Okay, terrific. That sounds good. We'll look forward to seeing you all again on the 24th with a more robust plan. And again, it's mostly just getting out in front of this so that we don't get pushed to the last minute. I think last year that was a somewhat expensive proposition for the cinema to do it so late in the game, which obviously was unavoidable. So thank you for your time. And you guys know where to find me on my email if any questions arise between now and the 24th. And Mr. LaRocca, I will be in touch with you, I hope tomorrow.
Great. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.